Bienvenidos a este nuevo conversatorio de Revitalizando las instituciones. En esta tarde vamos a hablar de revitalizar las instituciones, especialmente de capital humano. Tenemos importantes expositores. El primero de ellos es Robert Shimer. Él es George Stiglitz Service Professor in Economics and the College at the University of Chicago, where has been a faculty member since 2003. Shimer is widely recognized for his contributions to labor economics and macroeconomics, for focusing on search, frictions, labor market, mixed matters, and employment dynamics. He is an elected member of the American Academy of Arts and Science, a Fellow of Econometric Society, an Economic Theory Fellow of the Society for the Advance of Economic Theory, and a Fellow of the Society of Labor Economics. He is currently one of the 3 faculty directors of University of Chicago Economics for Everyone initiative. He was awarded the Sherwin-Rosen Prize for Outstanding Contributions in Labor Economics. In recent years, he has consulted for the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta and Chicago and held leadership roles, including co-chairing the NPER Economic Situation and Growth Macro Perspective Group, serving as head editor of the Journal of Political Economy, and chairing the Kenneth C. Griffin Department of Economics at the University of Chicago. His work has been published in top journals, including the American Economic Review, Econometrica, Quarterly Journal of Economics, Review of Economics Studies, and Journal of Political Economy. Shimer earned his PhD from Massachusetts Institute of Technology in 1996. También contamos con expositores como la profesora Vesna Vandakovic. She is an associate professor at the School of Business and Economics of the Universidad de Desarrollo in Chile. She holds a PhD in economics from Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile. Her research focuses on entrepreneurship dynamics in development economies, productivity, and the design of entrepreneurial and innovation ecosystem. She has published widely in leading journals such as Entrepreneurship Theory and Practice, Journal of Small Business Management and Research Policy, and collaborates in international research projects on entrepreneurship, migration, and demographic change. Beyond academia, she has served on several corporate and public boards and as a public advisor to Chile's National Productivity Commission and Portugal, fostering stronger links between research, business, and public policy. Cristian Laroulet. Was graduated with a degree in business administration from the Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile and obtained a master's degree in economics from the University of Chicago, United States. He has had a long-standing academic career. He has served as a professor at the Economics School of the Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile, Adolfo Ibáñez University, and Universidad de Chile. He was also a visiting researcher at the Institute of the Americas, University of California, San Diego, United States. He is one of the founders of Inteligencia. In addition to his work as a professor and researcher, he served as Dean of the School of Economics and Business and as Vice President of Postgraduate School Studies at UDD. He has authored several academic publications in Chile and abroad, including Economía from McGraw-Hill, Educación en la Encrucijada, RIL and UDD, and Chile Camino al Desarrollo de Mercurio Aguilar. He is a full member of the Academy of Social, Political, and Moral Sciences of the Institute of Chile, He has extensive experience in the design and implementation of public policies. He served as Chief of Staff to former Finance Minister Hernán Vicky and was Executive Director of the Instituto Libertad y Desarrollo think tank for 20 years. He held the position of Secretary General of the Presidency during President Piñera's administration from 2010 to 2014, and later served as head of the Presidential Advisory Group from 2018 to 2022. Les pido un gran aplauso para todos ellos. Dejo con ustedes a don Ernesto Silva Méndez, quien va a moderar. Él es profesor de la Universidad de Desarrollo y director ejecutivo de FARO. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias a ti. Well, thank you very much, Rob, Vesna, and Christian, for being here this evening. And FARO started some time ago with an initiative to look at different institutions. And in a cycle called, in a series of events called Revitalizing Institutions. We had one a couple of months ago talking about how to put again ideas into related to economic growth. And today is the day for human capital. And this is going to work this way. Rob is going to open the floor with some general remarks. Then we will have a conversation. I will lead some questions. And then I will open the floor for questions for the audience if you want. Okay, this is a time to have an open discussion here, Rob. We have students, we have faculty members, and we have also friends of Universidad de Desarrollo and people interested in learning from your experience and from Vesna and for Christian. Rob.
Thank you very much, Ernesto. Thank you very much, Maria de la Luz. And thank you to the Economics for Everyone leadership team. I'm in Chile in large part because of Economics for Everyone, and I just want to take a moment to explain what Economics for Everyone is and what we're doing and trying to do in Chile. Economics for Everyone is something that started with a course at the University of Chicago. And it started with the idea that if people would just take one course, we teach in 9-week quarters, if they would just have 9 weeks of economics, what's the most important ideas that they could learn during those 9 weeks? We thought that a lot of times introductory economics classes become classes in applied mathematics, where they teach people certain, certainly important economic ideas, but people take away how to move curves or how to do certain mathematics, and they don't come away with a deep understanding for how the economic system works. What's the role of markets and governments in the economy? So what we try to do is come up with a course which addresses those questions and teaches our students about how to think rather than telling them what to think. We want them to use economic reasoning to think critically about the world around them and help them make better decisions in their own lives and a better understanding of their environment. When the questions that I think I'm going to talk about tonight, that's exactly what questions come up, but the questions I think we'll talk about tonight, and when I teach the class that I teach at the University of Chicago, one thing which is clear is that the only thing which is constant is change. We live in an environment which changes all of the time. The ability of people, our students, to adapt to that environment and learn and continue to improve is critical to their long-run success. And our understanding of the economy is something which also continues to evolve as we get new information, new data. That process of change, though, is also something which takes time, and adaptation to the economy is something which takes time. Economics can be a tool for navigating the world. It can also be a tool for changing the world. We're working with UDD to teach Economics for Everyone through the E4E Chile program, and I'm really excited to see how that program is developed.
Thank you very much, Rob. And let me start with a question related to the role of higher education, thinking in the future of the human capital. You have been working extensively on human capital and labor markets. And I would like if you can share with us your views on the role of higher education institutions in the challenge of preparing human capital for the future of the economy and the world?
Yeah, so I think the first thing to say is that human capital is the most important determinant of individuals' well-being through their lives, in addition to their personal relationships that they have. So your economic well-being, what skills you have at 18, at 21, these are going to be the most important determinants of your economic well-being through your life. And obviously, family has some important role in determining those things, but formal educational institutions also have a very important role. So one thing that researchers have found is an incredibly valuable thing that comes out from higher education is the ability to adapt to a changing world. A technical degree can be incredibly useful for teaching a particular set of skills, but those are often skills that get locked in our changing environment. Higher education has the potential and has, when done well, enabled people to develop the skills that allow them to adapt in a changing environment. Now, how well that works also depends on the quality of higher education, and I think I've had some discussions about that here. I think one thing to keep in mind is that higher education is not fundamentally different than a lot of other industries. If you have competition in higher education, that pushes higher educational institutions to providing the skills that people want, that people need. The lack of competition in higher education, like lack of competition in other industries, keeps things static and prevents that the greatest gains from higher education from coming out.
What are you seeing in the US in terms of changes and initiatives in order to adapt higher education to the new challenges that we're having in the labor market?
So there's a number of challenges in the US right now. So a number of challenges uniquely facing higher education in the US. So there's a lot of ways I could unpack that question. One question which I think we don't know the answer to yet is about the role of artificial intelligence in higher education. I think that's a challenge for all of us as educators. I actually see that we're in an early stage of that process. I think where we are as being like a high school teacher who was used to giving a long division, or maybe a grade school teacher who was used to giving a long division question as a homework assignment. And at some point they realized when their students had access to calculators that the students were just going to go and use a calculator to answer those kinds of questions. And so they did things like banning the use of calculators or giving in-class tests to prevent the students from using calculators. Now, this worked at a higher level too. People would give in an economics class or statistics class, they would be asked to do something like invert a matrix. Computers turn out to be very, very good at doing that type of calculation, but that was the old kinds of questions that economics students were asked to do. What people didn't understand when computers first started appearing on our desktops is that the advent of the computer would allow us to do all sorts of things that seemed impossible to do before we had a computer on our desktop. It allowed researchers, everybody, to leverage their skills to be able to do things that seemed like impossible to ask before. With AI, to a large extent right now, we're in a place where AI is like a problem for us as educators. It's something we have to prevent our students from using. We will get to a place where AI is something that we use in the classroom and outside of the classroom, and we teach our students how to use AI to enhance their productivity and allow them to do things that they couldn't imagine doing right now. I don't know that I have all of the answers to how exactly we're going to do that. This is actually something we're investigating in work with an ed tech company in Economics for Everyone. We're investigating the use of AI to give something like the experience in a large classroom, to give students the experience of what it would be like to be in a one-on-one tutorial with a faculty member. So by programming the AI based on the material that we teach in Economics for Everyone, allow students to get critical feedback and encouragement from an AI chatbot that answers in the way that we hope would answer in the way that my co-teacher and I would answer. So I see, that's probably a small piece of it, but the general goal for teaching in an environment with AI is ultimately going to be to teach students to be able to leverage AI so that AI doesn't replace the skills that they have, but allows them to be able to do much more than they could do.
Well, I'm not sure if you know, but most of the audience here knows that Christian Laroulette It's maybe one of the most optimistic guys in Chile. Always optimistic. And I want to ask you both, Christian and Rob, how do you feel about the artificial intelligence, the AI, in a middle-income country such as us, where the productivity has been stagnated in the last 2 decades? Maybe, I don't know exactly, but so we have a challenge. It's not the same in a developed country, in a very poor country, but we're in a middle-income country. So what are your thoughts on that? And maybe, Christian, you can start maybe to set the tone.
Yes, I'm going to try. First, thanks for this opportunity to share with Professor Shimer this meeting. I'm going to, first of all, introduce the optimistic part. And for doing that, I'm going to tell, especially for the young people here, a little bit of history. In 1956, 4 academics from the University of Chicago arrived to Chile to make an agreement with the Catholic University. The leader of that group was Professor Theodore Schulz. And he is perhaps one of the most important persons in the world of the economists in precisely the subject we are discussing today, human capital. And he wrote a very famous paper in the 60s, around the 60s, beginning of the 60s, in which one he said the main explanation for underdevelopment is the lack of investment in human capital. And he came here and make an agreement for improved teachings of economics in the Catholic University. And thanks to the externalities of that agreement, it seems to me that the influence was in all the teaching of economics at the university. And perhaps one example is that we have the honor of having here the dean of the Universidad de Chile economics department. In the first group that went to Chicago, around 40% of the group was students graduate from Universidad de Chile. And what I want to say, and this is the optimistic part, related with that experience, is that today could be also a very important day for the future of investment in human capital in Chile. In the agreement between Chicago and Catholic University, was really that agreement very significant for the human capital accumulation of this country at the tertiary education. Now we have an agreement between the University of Chicago. The leader of that agreement is Professor Shimer, and UDD, and we hope many other universities to teach good economics at the secondary level in our education system. I'm sure that we are going to have very good news in the next 20, 40 years in that process of accumulation of human capital. That is the optimistic part. And the more, let's say, not pessimistic, but the big question we have today is also related with what Ernesto said. What is going to be the influence of the artificial intelligence, especially in countries like middle-income countries like Chile. And we have another good news. Perhaps the person that has research and has made more research in the area is precisely the Nobel Prize, Daron Acemoglu, who was the the thesis advisor of Professor Shimer. Then Professor Shimer knows very well Daron Acemoglu, and I'm sure knows very well the reason that he is relatively pessimistic, Professor Acemoglu, in what is going to be the influence of artificial intelligence in the world. Precisely for countries like Chile, because he said two things that, according to my view, is very, very important. One, could be very dangerous for the distribution of income. You know very well that this is one of the big discussions we have in Chile. But the other one that I consider for myself and my view also very important is the influence that Daron Acemoglu and others said that this technology revolution is going to have in the level of competition in the markets. Because he said that the level of concentration is going to be much higher. And this is, for countries like Chile, this is very complex and very influential, because we are a very small country with a very small market, in which one also the president of your country is trying to introduce less competition in the market through rising tariffs in the majority of the world, and that could be dangerous for us. For a country like Chile, I'm going to finalize with this long comment. For countries like Chile, Chile needs bigger companies. And then that means like Codelco. And then, you know, this new technology could be very dangerous for us.
What do you think? Because it's market concentration, income distribution issues, but at the same time, a lot of opportunities. What do you think for a country like us?
So let me speak outside of Chile for a moment, and then I don't know if I can exactly answer the question specific to Chile. I also don't want to take responsibility either for my president or my thesis advisor. And I want to go back in history as well, but before you did, to put ourselves somewhere, I think it would probably be around 1910. 1910 in the United States, most people worked on farms. The human capacity, the view was that what people were capable of doing was brute labor. Most people, literacy was not zero, but it was not high. The types of jobs that most adults did just involved things that were a little bit too refined for a pack animal to do, required more dexterity than an ox had, but didn't require a lot more intellectual power than an ox had. And then the tractor came around. And the tractor was able to do first what the ox could do, and then with a little refinement, what the farmer could do better than the farmers could do. And the view of the Daron Acemoglus of the time would have been that this is going to lead to ever-growing income inequality, starvation of the people who were working on the farms, because the only thing that they were capable of doing was this type of labor. And of course, that's not what happened. What happened was people moved to cities. They moved into manufacturing. We had the explosion of manufacturing at that time. And ultimately, as people got richer and richer, we shifted from manufacturing into service jobs. We increased the education, back to human capital, of the workers so that people attained a high level of literacy. farming jobs look nothing like they looked back in the day. And now instead of having 40 or 50% of people working on farms, it's around 1% of people working on farms, producing far more food than their forefathers had been able to produce. To me, AI represents something with the potential to be as transformative as the tractor and all the Industrial Revolution was. Now, as you go through that process, this was not a process without pain. You can go and read stories about things like the Dust Bowl in the United States, and I'm sure similar experiences in other countries, of people who lost their livelihoods because of the tractor. But the outcome was, within a generation, 2 generations, that people were immeasurably better off from these changes. So the difficulty that we have with this kind of change is adaptation to the change is something that takes a long time, and it happens in a scale which really affects people. That there are winners and losers from technological change, and the losers can lose for a long period of time. The questions that I see for AI, yes, there's the possibility of a significant amount of concentration coming out of AI. I don't see that type of concentration as being particularly problematic, because it's a concentration which comes about from creating a product which is sufficiently better than the products that are already out there. So if OpenAI has something like 80% of the market share in chatbots, it's able to do something that nobody could do before. It also has a lot of competition from the fringe players in that market, and it's charging a price which is very, very close to zero at this point for the amazing services that it's able to produce. So market concentration per se is not a problem. A problem would be if market concentration is somehow able to evolve into something that allows for earning extremely high profits and stifling future innovation. Usually for that to happen, it requires not just innovation, but it requires co-opting the government, getting the government to protect the market that these guys have created. So worry when you hear AI companies talking about how we should stifle future innovation in AI and set up government regulations that prevent future innovation. If you're the leader in AI, the ones who are going to benefit from stopping innovation in AI is the leadership in AI. That's how they're going to keep their market power. But a continual process of innovation is one that we've seen where we have this, a market leader that seems insurmountable. It's Microsoft. No, the insurmountable leader is Apple. No, the insurmountable leader is Google. No, the insurmountable leader is OpenAI. That type of serial monopolist is what breeds competition and breeds an improvement. So that's, I think, is the correct response to the concerns about market power. The concerns on inequality I see as more real. And one question is what the government response to that's going to be. And here, let me speak from an American's perspective. I don't know whether Chilean would be different. But one call that you hear in a world of abundance is that we should provide a significant level of minimum basic income or universal basic income to everybody. And certainly the process that we've seen where people shift from industry to industry as new industries come online, that process can get stopped if the government provides enough resources to people to not work anymore. We could live potentially in a very different world in the future, where a minority of people are working a significant portion of their life in very lucrative professions, and most people are not earning a paycheck.
Thank you very much. I think one of our future revitalizing institutions is going to be related also with challenges of revitalizing social policies, how to adapt in the challenges that are coming. Bethna, you want to comment on what Rob was saying?
Yes. First of all, thank you for inviting me to this interesting conversation. I think I'm the only one here that hasn't studied or worked in Chicago. I studied here in the Universidad de Chicago that was created and founded by Chicago students, and that I made my PhD at Universidad Católica too. So I guess I'm a product of this, story. Cristiano was. So I just wanted to highlight one thing about artificial intelligence. I guess that we see it as a technology that's like just coming, or it's going to change things. And we were talking today with Pelayo, and this is happening already, and in big companies in Chile, and also in new companies. We see in mining, we see in industries that are really big, We see investment in artificial intelligence. They're using it daily. So I guess that we're not that far, and we're already incorporated it. And that's one of the challenges we have as universities, how we are teaching and how we are giving our students skills to work with these new technologies. I went to the Academy of Management this year, and the sessions that were about artificial intelligence, how to teach, how to do research, were full of people. Like, you couldn't get it. You know, it's really something that's changing. And I guess that we're all expecting and trying to see how we're going to do it. But it has to do with some skills and abilities our students, our Chilean students, do not have. And it has to do with the adaptation, the capacity to adapt. If you see the report from the OECD, Chile has low skills in numeracy, literacy, and in solving problems. And solving problems is one of the main, making the right questions is the right way to work with artificial intelligence. So I guess there we have a big challenge.
I have another question for you, but it's related. Your research is connected with entrepreneurship, growth, and human capital. So entrepreneurship can play a role in the development of human capital. And I want to learn, if you can share with us, what should be done, in your view, in terms of policies to promote, develop, and foster entrepreneurship in Chile?
I guess we have a big stock of entrepreneurs in Chile. It's not something about the number of entrepreneurs in Chile. Studies show that 1/3 of the population declare that they are entrepreneurs. We have a lot of people that want to be entrepreneurs too. It's a very legitimate option, career option, but we have a problem. Like, this entrepreneurial activities do not generate value, enough value. They're not innovative enough. They don't scale, grow, and not all of them, but most of them. Almost, 8% of the entrepreneurs in Chile declare that they don't sell abroad, they don't export their products or services, and we're a small country. So we see that we lack of quality entrepreneurial activities. We have a lot of intelligence there. So I believe that as a university, and also what we do here at the university, it has to do with developing human capital that is prepared to lead these new entrepreneurial ventures that add value. Okay? And how do you do it? How do you do this? And it has to do with entrepreneurial mindset. And this can be applied not only to create new ventures, but also in the work we develop in our industry, as an academic, as working in a company. This has to do with knowing the market, identifying opportunities and exploiting these opportunities. And to do this, you need these new skills and capacities. So doing the right questions, developing talent, and connecting business with ventures. I guess that's, so university, business, and ventures is where we should go. Chile has a big institution that is Corfo. Corfo has worked in developing programs for generating more entrepreneurship in the country, and we've seen good and bad experiences. And I guess we rely a lot on the role of the state in developing, new entrepreneurial ventures. And I guess there's a lot that has to do with the private sector, big firms related with small firms. There's a lot to do in this. So I don't have one answer, but it's a big challenge. And I guess we're addressing it here in the university.
Thank you. I see that there is interest in the audience in asking some questions, but before that, I have one additional question for Rob and also one for Christian. Rob, the human capital means different things in different stages, right? It means sessions in schools, sessions in higher education, but also in the labor market. You were mentioning in your previous intervention what's going to happen with the adoption with AI. And I think it's interesting to learn from your view in terms of upskilling and reskilling the labor force, especially during this transition. And which are relevant elements in terms of labor market regulation, incentives that can be placed in an economy in order to keep with the labor force updated?
Yeah, so again, a lot in that question that I could talk about. One question that let me start with is labor market regulation. It's very tempting in an era with a lot of change for policymakers to put in barriers to those changes, increase the cost of hiring workers and other types of barriers to labor turnover. And it's a short-run cure. If the problem is that too many workers are getting laid off, and you make it extremely expensive to lay off workers, it helps temporarily. The problem is, when you start doing things like that, it keeps firms from hiring new workers. It keeps those workers from relocating, retraining, relocating to more productive parts of the economy. And I think we've seen in recent decades in other rich countries, let me take Germany as an example, policies that were seen as being very successful, say in the face of the Great Recession, at reducing the impact of the Great Recession. Turned out when we look over the 15 years since 2000, or 17 years since 2008, actually now to be retarding growth in Germany, and has a lot of problems that the German economy hasn't been able to adapt to the changes which have happened during the last 17 years. So a basic thing is to note that, yeah, the economy is something which is undergoing change all the time. And the role of the government is not to stand in the way of that change. You're just going to have, regardless of that, minimizing barriers to the reallocation of labor. Now, there's another question, which is what's the role of the government to help people to retrain, to take the farmers I talked about earlier and turn them into manufacturing workers. I don't know the Chilean experience on this. I know in the US, the government's been remarkably unsuccessful at retraining workers. So government retraining programs just in the US don't work. I'd be thrilled if you told me that in Chile they work. The private sector, again, is better at this. It's something, and we certainly see it with young workers, but competition where people make an active decision that this is the place they want to go to retrain, maybe in conjunction, the need to do some retraining in conjunction with other benefits to incentivize them to do that. But then again, competition between universities and other sources of retraining to help workers to make those kinds of adjustments. There is an important role.
Thank you very much. Christian, I will change a little bit the subject, but I think it's maybe related to some emphasis that can be put in the discussion of human capital. There's a book by Dan Wang, Breakneck. I think you have heard about that. It's China's quest to engineer the future. Dan Wang, he's a research fellow at Hoover Institution, and what he's saying is that the US has an elite based in lawyers, and that China has an elite based in engineers. The Economist mentioned this book a couple of weeks ago, and has been some discussion. And I don't like centralized planning and decisions, but maybe it's interesting to have a view on what should be the emphasis in terms of training human capital, or what is the main ideas. Christian. I don't know, Rob, if you want to...
I want to say something about that.
Yeah, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
I think the problem is, I don't disagree with the premise of that, may be right. The problem is a society where lawyers play such an important role in the production process. People don't become...
I'm a lawyer.
My parents are both lawyers. Law has a place in society, but when in order to build a factory, you have to hire a team of lawyers to get permission to do it, or your way that you're going to protect your market powers by hiring lawyers to petition the government in order to pass the appropriate legislation for you, or so on. That's where lawyers are a symptom of the problem, not the problem themselves. So.
Okay. Yeah.
There is a very famous paper written around 1970s that calculate the number of regulations in the USA economy and the influence of the number of lawyers in that regulation. And the conclusion was that one of the most important problems in the American economy, the very high number and influential lawyers in the country.
The interesting thing is that he's mentioning lawyers versus engineers.
Yeah.
No economists at all.
You know, really, I don't have an answer to. I didn't read the book. It's remember also a book that was written also in the 80s by the dean of the Business Sloan School in MIT. Remember that book that said, okay, the economic battle is going to be won by Japan. Huh? Remember that? Do you remember that book?
There is a famous paper by Murphy, Schleifer, and Bishney that they said that the problem of the US compared to Japan was that Japan had too many lawyers, and they said it 1 year before the bubble and the stagnation of Japan. That's a QJ paper. It's a very good.
Then, Ernesto, I prefer to, together with Pepo, remember those articles and books because this is a little bit of a competition for the news. Okay, but can I say something?
You can, and then we will go to the audience for.
What I want to remember, because you were asking about this discussion about in the US human capital, and I want to emphasize that we have here a big problem. We have a proposition by the government that want to make a significant change in the way we are going to finance in the future. I hope no, that is the proposition. In a way in which 100%, at least in the short run, in the period in which the students are going to be at the university level, is going to be a system in which 100% of the resources are going to come from the budget of that year, and then for finance that they're going to apply a human capital tax. And the comment I want to make is that there is an important contribution by Philippe Ajon and others economists, very influential economists in the area of education, that they analyze the question which country, which group of countries have the best university system. And they compare the American system with the European system. And with the data, they arrive to the conclusion that the American system is by far best, with better results in terms of, let's say, many indicators, many coverage, quality, Nobel Prizes, and many other indicators, research, influential research, in which one day arrive to the conclusion that the American system is much better than the European system. And why? Because the American system is much more decentralized, with a very higher level of competition, and with less amount of control by the state, regulation by the state, in comparison of the European system. And if you analyze the Chilean system started in the beginning of the 80s, you're going to find that decade by decade, year by year, the Chilean system is much more similar to the American system. Then and this is my pessimistic role at the end of this conversation, is that we could make a big mistake if finally the political system approve that proposition.
Okay, I will open the floor for questions. We will have time after the event for conversation. What I would like to ask, the possibility of asking questions, but please short questions so speakers can go with their answer. Microphone. Okay, I will start here and then I will go there, okay?
Thanks, Klaus Schmidt-Hebel. A question for Professor Shimer regarding the interplay of investment in human capital and in research and development, of which probably Christian would also say that the US is the paramount example of a very virtuous interaction between mostly private spending on R&D and human capital formation. Countries with very high R&D expenses as a percentage to GDP are Israel with more than 4%, but there's in a significant chunk, it's state-driven, it's government-driven in high-tech sectors, in high-tech military sectors, and so on and so forth. The other extreme is the US, where it is mostly private sector-driven and university-driven. In Chile, we invest only 0.3% of GDP, of which 0.2% is spent by the government on subsidies or direct investment, and only 0.1% of GDP by the private sector, approximately. I may be wrong by a tiny fraction. At the same time in Chile, we are importing massively unskilled labor, mostly of the illegal form from our northern neighbors, in Caribbean too. And we have exported massively human capital built up in Chile to the rest of the world since October 2019, for the last 6 years. So the question is, what's the role from your experience of looking at these virtuous cycles in the US or maybe in other countries? What's the role for government policies to correct beyond the obvious, closing your frontier, let's say, to illegal immigrants of low skills? A part of the obvious, what's the role, which are the most effective levers for government intervention in order to get a positive virtuous cycle to start between both types of investment?
So, again, a lot in that question. Let me leave the migration off for a moment. I have a thought to come back to that. First, the U.S. government has had a significant role in investment through the higher education system for the most part. And we actually see now, as the government is cracking back on its investment in higher education, what the consequences of that is. One feature of research and development, the development of new ideas that a number of economists have uncovered, is that the innovator captures a relatively small share of the benefits of the innovation that he comes up with. And so that's a classic example of an externality where there is a role for subsidizing that kind of activity. Now, the difficulty comes from whether the government can identify which of the places to put R&D into. So it's very easy to throw a lot of money at something. It's less clear whether the government's going to get a high return on that activity. But in the U.S. case, maybe there's some luck to it, maybe there's some other elements where the government has put money has, originally to a large part from the defense industry, has turned out through computers and other technology, has turned out to be also an extremely productive place. I want to come back to one thing on R&D. A very important component of that is maybe the U.S. doesn't educate enough engineers at home, but we've historically also been a very open place to taking in engineers from other countries who have contributed a lot to growth in the U.S. And although there's a immediate brain drain from the source country of those engineers coming to the U.S., many of them later return home and bring their skills with them back to their source country. So the brain drain often leads to a flow in the other direction as well. For a smaller country like Chile, the U.S. clearly has an important role. China clearly has an important role in the global production of research and development. Whether a small country needs to play that kind of important part, arguably, you could imagine that Chile can get by on doing things well without necessarily advancing the research and development frontier, there are small countries which have been R&D leaders. Israel is one example. I think some of the countries around the Baltic have also been successful at this.
Beth, do you want to comment on this, please?
Something that has to do with migrations, and we've studied the visa systems in different countries to attract talent, to attract high capital, high human capital, migrations. With this project, we did it like 6 years ago, I guess. We made a paper with what was like a white paper. We presented the different cases in different countries. There's the case of Canada, the case of New Zealand, the case of Australia that had special visas for entrepreneurs, high capital, high human capital. And we presented this, to the Congress. We took it to policymakers, and they said that that wasn't a problem in Chile. That wasn't of our interest. That we were selecting people to come in, and we shouldn't select people. And now the discussion is different. 6 years later, the discussion is different. And the vision was utilitarian, that we were using the migrants, and it was, it wasn't that we were presenting. And now we have another project that has to do with migrations and entrepreneurship. And what we are seeing in our data is that talent is, is evenly distributed. But the difference is the access to the entrepreneurial ecosystem. They don't have the networks, and the same happens with other minorities, migrants, elder people, or women. The problem is the connections, the networks. There's something that can be done, like people that have talent, that have ideas, that have the skills, are not able to develop their ventures because they don't have access to these networks that are very closed, and they're not young, they don't speak the same language, they don't belong to the same universities. We've seen that we can work in bridging and bonding mechanisms to these people, incorporate them, in the system. That's one of the ways to do it. But the problem has changed. Migration's visions have changed over time. I remember being in the Universidad de Chile, FAO, and they told me I was, doing something. I was using the people, thinking about bringing this kind of visas to attract talent to Chile, and now everything changed. So I guess it's something that's it's one of the demographic changes that's going on around the world, and I insist that talent is evenly distributed. So we have opportunities there.
Thank you very much. We have more questions. One over there. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much for the chance to be here. Thank you to the panel to share your idea with us. I think that we have an awesome discussion about innovation, AI, but my question is a step before, and that is, for example, surrounding the effects about screens on the education. Maybe we are here in Chile. Appears today, especially primary school, if the screens on cell phone, tablets, notebooks are currently provided in some schools. Today we have, definitely, as a teacher in the university, I see the negative effects in especially lack of concentration, lack of creativity sometimes when we have an open discussion with some students. And my apologies to the students present here. I think that maybe, I don't know, but maybe the next generation couldn't be better than the current generation in that sense, because we're seeing that negative effect in children, and now we have these negative effects in the young people. So what is doing the US about this topic, and maybe what is the possible solutions that from the education and maybe the next steps in the labor market we have to this problem?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so I'm sympathetic with your concerns. I see the same thing in the classroom, and I read how bad many people think screens are. One thing that surprised me, a paper I read recently, I don't have the citation off the top of my head, but a number of states or localities screens in classrooms. And I think the expectation is we were going to see a big jump in test scores following that, and we didn't. There's really nothing, or if anything, a negative response of test scores to that. So just removing the screens from the classroom seems not to have the intended effect. I don't understand why. It surprises me. I think it surprised the researchers who investigated that question as well. But it's not as simple as just saying, let's get rid of the screens that we have. You can go on screens, I think, back to a much younger age. And I'm not an expert on child development, and so excuse me if I get my facts wrong exactly here. But my understanding is, from a very young age, when the brain is going through its most dramatic development, how babies interact, who they interact with, matters a lot. And so if you replace the parent or caregiver with an iPad, their brain just develops in a different way. And that's something which I think is extremely difficult for the state to do anything about. It's ultimately the decision of parents about how they raise their child. It's clear as a parent, I can see where the attraction is of sticking them in front of the screen. But it's just the fact is that technology today is not a good substitute for what we can do. Maybe some hope of AI is that could one day change. It could be that the level of interactivity that you get from your screen is so much greater that it actually becomes a good substitute for parental time. But I think it's that type of issue that we have right now, use all the other screen time outside of the classroom. And I don't see any realistic way that the government would step in and have any effect on that, or want to live in a society, I guess, where the government would have that level of control. So yeah.
Thank you. Rob, I was going back to the initiative Economics for Everyone, and that's something we are implementing now in Chile, and as Christian mentioned, we expect to have an impact, a strong impact in future years. I was wondering, what was your vision in thinking about our title of this seminary, like Revitalizing Institutions? What was the vision you had when you thought about this course, Economics for Everyone, and what's the impact you think it has had in the US? And now, thinking about the work we're doing in Chile, what do you foresee as an impact for this kind of initiative?
So first, I wish I could take the credit as being the first person to think about economics for everyone. I was relatively late into the game. It started as a course. John List and Steve Levitt taught it as actually at the behest of a donor. Taught it at the University of Chicago, and they thought about what would be the ideas on, again, if you had 9 weeks to teach people economics and you want to minimize the barriers to entry to it, what would you actually want to teach them? Actually, my interest in Economics for Everyone started on a trip down to Chile. I think I was department chair, and I was talking to people about a variety of different activities that were taking place in the economics department. And I started getting more interested in some of those activities than others. And I also saw this incredibly warm reception in Chile, especially here at UDD. I think I can say, sorry to leave you out from this, but Ernesto and Christian being the people who really were leading the push on this. You understand from many, many conversations you have with many, many people how little understanding there is of basic economic principles in the world, and how it's not a question about being able to calculate the elasticity of a supply curve that's going to solve that problem, but it's something about just understanding the basics about how economic institutions work, what markets do well, what governments do well, where there's potential for market failure, and as importantly, the potential for government failure. And trying to find a way to get across those ideas by using anecdotes instead of rigorous empirical analysis, but anecdotes that are informed by rigorous empirical analysis. Trying to get across those ideas to people is something that you can explain to people if they have no understanding of economics. And actually for many people, including frankly some of our PhD students, maybe some of my colleagues who know a lot of economics, they need that kind of training as well. They lose sight of the basic forces in economics and things that I think were maybe better understood 40 years ago than they are today. So I got excited about it because I see it as something, as an educator, it's something which is just an incredibly important project to reach out to a broader audience and try to educate them beyond what we can do inside of one class. classroom in the University of Chicago on something which is a really fundamental question for improving human well-being.
We're running out of time, so I will ask our members of the panels to take a pen and take some notes, because we're going to have 3 very short questions together, of course. So we'll start with you, please.
Before the revolution, people have to change their skills to adapt to new technology. For me, buying and constantly in the job market, what kind of new skills will be most prominent in the new era of AI, and in what areas are we expected to be better than the others?
Excellent question. Thank you very much. Can you pass the mic down here, Gonzalo, please? And then finally here. Thank you. I will ask any member of the panel to take the Gonzalo.
Thank you. Back to E4E. Many decades ago, and I've been teaching for decades, Introduction to Economics, there was a paper on the follow-up of people who took one course in basic economics and people who didn't take not even that one. 5 years later, there was no change in the answers of one group versus the other. Have you done the follow-up on the E4E for people? Because I'm sure you designed all over again, whole course. And I'm sure it's a much better course than the Introduction to Economics that we used to teach 4 decades ago. So have you done the follow-up, whether there is a change in the attitudes towards economics or in the answers they give to economics 4 years later or 5 years later after they graduate from the E4E course?
Thank you, Gonzalo. Please. But we have some data from Chile. We're looking
Not 5 years.
Chilean economists, Chicago economists has had in plan the neoliberalism economic in Chile. What do you think about now that we're in fact a new election? What do you think about in our time, what happened with this economic model?
Okay, thank you very much. We will start with Vesna, then Cristiana, and finally Bruno.
I will answer your question. And I think that the most important skills have to do with the capacity to adapt, to decide, and to create value. And I guess that's one of the things we're teaching in E4E, like economics for everyone. It has to do with the way you're thinking, to analyze how people take decisions and how you are taking decisions, analyze your opportunity costs. You have to see, benefits, costs. This is like a common language that will be useful for you, since school to being a board member, the way people are making decisions. So it's very important that you have this capacity to adapt, decide wisely, and to create value. And always with a purpose. You have to have a purpose in your life and your career. I think it's very important, but you have to do it with passion.
Cristian?
I'm going to directly to the question of Gonzalo. I want to give some data. We started with a program for teachers, professors of schools in the last 2 months. And we have today 170 professors, teachers studying in this program. We made a test at the beginning of the program, and in a scale of 1 to 7, the average was 3.1. And 1 month later, with another test For Jacques the Advanced, the level was 5.6. Very impressive.
Yeah, was the teacher.
No.
And the 5-year answer to that question would be great, but unfortunately we have to wait. For the University of Chicago, I think one issue has been the way the course was originally constructed. There's no natural treatment and control group. Students chose to enroll in these courses. There's a lot of selection about that. But we are very eager to evaluate how this program affects people. In the short run, does it affect where they go to college? Does it affect what major they take when they go to college? And then in the long run, we'd love to know things about economic well-being. Okay, just back to the first question again. I think I'll probably repeat similar to Vesna. I think the most important thing that you can learn is how to learn, and staying open to continuing to learn. If I was an economist back in 1910 when the tractor was coming along, I hope I'd be wise enough to say your kids or your grandkids are going to do great in the future, though they probably won't be on the farm. But I probably wouldn't be wise enough to be able to say what manufacturing job they would be doing, or that your great-grandkid would be a yoga instructor, or jobs that couldn't really be imagined. What was important was for them to be in a place where they could take advantage of the changes that were happening.
I think we will follow the conversation for down with cheese and wine, but before that, I want to mention that the E4E initiative will be publishing a couple of books soon. One, how to teach microeconomics in schools, one, how to teach macroeconomics in schools, and also one on how to teach personal finance. And Professor Mariela Luz-Domper is the one who's leading that, so congratulations for that. I want to share with you that we have another initiative for schools that I want to invite you to visit. It's libre.org with 2 B's. It's an edutainment initiative that is very interesting also to open the mind of school teachers, families, students in order to have different economic concepts and other ideas that are relevant. I think Cristiano wanted to mention something. No? But finally, I think this has been a very, very good conversation. I want to thank Vesna, Christian, and Rob for being today here and for sharing your views with this audience. Thank you very much to you all.